one-sided narratives presented virtually unchallenged. National news quoting anonymous sources that turn out to be wrong. It's been a bad few years for media credibility.
We asked about national political reporters. Are they credible? Are they reliable?
And what does that tell you?
The media has a huge credibility problem, and it's always had the problem.
Fake news.
This week, a special full measure poll on America and the media.
What's your view of where we are with opiate use in the United States today?
I believe that it's completely overprescribed.
We talk with a therapist treating pain without narcotics.
Why did you decide there was a need to develop a new pain control alternative?
Well, the opioids aren't working. They're destroying people's lives.
And we take you to the streets of Hanoi. Our focus is one of this country's big passions and most famous foods, a soup called pho.
If it's spicy, we can change.
No, it's not. I had really spicy earlier. This is fine.
Welcome to Full Measure. I'm Sharyl Attkisson. Today we begin with a new Full Measure poll on the national media. As you might expect, the results aren't very good for the media. Whether it's coverage of the Russia investigation or the Covington high school kids, news consumers on all sides of the political spectrum report declining trust in us. We turn to two experts to analyze the current media madness.
The president addresses the nation.
Hopefully, we can rise above partisan politics.
One need only sample lowlights from last January to get a sense of the problem. A Seattle Fox affiliate aired a doctored video of President Trump.
The comparison shows Trump with an altered face and a looped licking of his lips.
And a January article about Melania Trump in The Telegraph was followed by 7 corrections, an apology, and an undisclosed payment to Mrs. Trump. One-sided narratives presented virtually unchallenged. National news quoting anonymous sources that turn out to be wrong. Also in January, there was a BuzzFeed bombshell.
The headline contains the most devastating part. President Trump directed his attorney to lie to Congress.
But special counsel Robert Mueller quickly refuted the story. The Washington Post took us inside the battle over Trump's immigration order, only to later admit the article misreported Trump's actions, a reported meeting had not actually occurred, and a conference call hadn't happened as described. FBI Director James Comey debunked a New York Times article about supposed contacts between Trump campaign staff and senior Russian intelligence officials.
In the main, it was not true.
And NBC News reported that Russian President Putin said he had compromising information about Trump. Actually, Putin said the opposite. It's been a bad few years for media credibility. A new poll conducted for Full Measure by Scott Rasmussen finds 42% of Americans believe national political news coverage is inaccurate and unreliable. Fewer, 38%, believe it is accurate and reliable. And 52% say it's worse compared to 5 years ago. National political reporters also get poor scores. Only 26% of those polled say reporters carefully report the facts. 57% say reporters use news stories to promote their own ideological agenda. Pollster Scott Rasmussen.
We asked about national political reporters. Are they credible? Are they reliable? And, a little more than 1 out of 3 people say yes. When we ask about Wikipedia, we get the exact same answer. So what's happening is we have a world where people look at journalists like they look at Wikipedia. Gee, that's an interesting fact. I better check it myself.
And what does that tell you?
The media has a huge credibility problem, and it's always had the problem. We talk about it differently today. Now we talk about it as a political bias. I think the issues have always been there. I mean, people were complaining about the bias of Walter Cronkite back in the 1960s.
People forget about that.
Yeah.
For it seems now more certain than ever that the bloody experience of Vietnam is to end in a stalemate.
It is often argued that Donald Trump created this media environment where everybody hates the media. And then others say he simply understood that environment and capitalized on it. Which is it you see?
Oh, people have hated the media for a very long time.
Fake news, folks, fake news. What's your message? Typical New York Times fake stories.
Donald Trump capitalized on that. He understood it, but he's not the first to do so. The first President Bush, when he was campaigning, he actually got kind of aggressive with, I think it was Dan Rather, during an interview because a lot of Republicans weren't sure he had the fire to be president.
It's not fair to judge my whole career by a rehash on Iran. How would you like it if I judged your career by those 7 minutes when you walked off the set in New York? Well, now, would you like that?
Mr. Vice President. So he capitalized on that, but all they are doing is tapping into sentiment that's already there, and Donald Trump is playing the media beautifully.
Rasmussen says his polling found a good recent example of how many today have come to regard or disregard the national media. The Covington High School pro-life students' confrontation with a Native American activist at a Washington, D.C. protest.
When the story broke of the students from Covington High School, we went out and polled right away when the story first broke and asked people what they thought. And as you would expect, liberals and conservatives had different views of whether the high school students acted inappropriately or somebody else did.
So to summarize, liberals probably thought the high school students who were pro-life behaved inappropriately and aggressively.
Yes.
And conservatives thought the Native American was the one who was inappropriate.
Yes. And by the way, conservatives also thought the media was inappropriate.
A group of teenagers, some Catholic high school students, seen wearing Make America Great Again hats, appearing to face off with Nathan Phillips, a 65-year-old Native American.
And then we had a week full of coverage. And as you recall, there was a lot more coverage that came out about the incident.
Our boys did nothing. No violence.
A lot more videos and a lot more information.
Viral video have the
And a week later, nobody's opinion changed.
I'm surprised by that because some reporters and in the media even apologized that they had been too hard on the children at first or the high school students without knowing the full story.
So many people admitted they made snap judgments before these other facts came in.
But you're saying the public at large didn't change their mind.
That's correct. The public at large made up their mind. They knew their sources.
But the most overwhelming poll results came when we asked about the motivation of political reporters.
78% of voters say that what reporters do with political news is promote their agenda. They think they use incidents as props for their agenda rather than seeking to accurately record what happened, the report.
That's a huge number.
Yeah. Only 14% think that a journalist is actually reporting what happened.
Most people seem to think reporters cannot be fair when it comes to their chosen political candidate.
If a reporter found out something that would hurt their favorite candidate, only 36% of voters think that they would report that.
So most people think the reporter would cover it up because they like the person.
Right, exactly. So voters are looking at them as a political activist, not as a source of information.
An actual reporter, professional reporter, would never do that.
Frank Sesno is a former CNN correspondent and bureau chief. As head of the School of Media and Public Affairs at the George Washington University, he routinely confronts declining public trust in the media.
The public understands fundamentally what journalism should be. They don't understand how it's actually practiced. And that falls to news organizations, in my view, to be more creative, more imaginative about how they're engaging with their publics, to both explain what they do, to defend what they do when it's controversial, and to be accountable for what they do if it's wrong.
After 2016, when so many of us got the election so wrong, we promised a period of self-reflection and correction. Have we done it?
No, not enough. If we had done the self-reflection and correction better and more deeply, there would be more reporters reporting from more places across the country, talking to more diverse audiences. We would not be so entirely focused, at least in certain media channels and places, on the Trump administration and the outrage of the moment. That being said, there is so much news from this administration. It's kind of hard not to do that.
If we don't get what we want, I will shut down the government.
Okay.
In the era of the Trump presidency, can you point to a couple of things you think the media has done right?
I would start actually in the Trump era by calling out NPR. I think NPR has done an exceptional job getting outside of Washington, engaging other voices and people from different sides of the ideological divide to get their sense of what's happening. I would call out the New York Times and the Washington Post for making remarkable use of multimedia. So there's a lot of good journalism and good media that's taking place also that extends beyond the Trump administration. There is such a thing as beyond the Trump administration.
It may not seem like it as we move quickly into campaign 2020.
I guess we should warn people, hang on to their seatbelt with 2020 campaign coming. What do you foresee in terms of media?
Yeah, so here's the next danger. The next danger is everybody walks right off the cliff of coverage, like they did last time, obsessing over, the candidate du jour, the moment du jour. How will the media be able to arbitrate this mass of people who all want to be president so that the audience can follow it with some degree of clarity, and so that you neither fall into an oversimplified narrative or a narrative that just revolves around the melodrama of who's up, who's down, and who's making the most noise or tweeting the most.
By the way, you can find my list of media mistakes in the era of Trump at SharylAttkisson.com. Ahead on Full Measure, amid the American opioid crisis, one therapist has a new approach for treating pain. The opioid epidemic is so bad, there's a whole cottage industry in treating addiction. Patients and doctors everywhere are searching for alternatives to manage serious pain. Physical therapist Eileen Kapsoftis has developed a drug-free strategy that's gaining traction. It attacks the source of the pain rather than medicating it.
What's your view of where we are with opiate use in the United States today? I believe that it's completely overprescribed. I get very upset when I have patients come in to see me who oftentimes were prescribed it prior to any other option given. I've had patients who, because the pain wasn't resolving quickly enough, they would prescribe the opioids. And they just weren't informed of the risks. They weren't informed of how dangerous they could be.
If opioids are very effective for pain, why is it a problem that they are used or overused?
Well, I think people are misinformed about how effective they are. The data shows that combining ibuprofen and acetaminophen together is actually more effective in pain relief than opioids. So the first thing is people need to be better educated, including the medical profession. Opioids are not that effective with pain. A lot of the people that I see who are actually consuming opioids are still having pain.
Why did you decide there was a need to develop a new pain control alternative?
Well, the opioids aren't working. They're destroying people's lives. I attend the Opioid Coalition every other month in my area, and it's a problem that's not being resolved. People's lives are completely destroyed by it, and we need to be addressing pain in a way that works, in a way that has more benefit than risk.
Is there such a thing that has no potential harm and only benefit?
Yes, a lot of the things that I do with my patients have no potential harm.
You are held out as someone who's developed a technique or some techniques that help control pain very effectively for some patients without drugs.
Yes.
What is this?
There's 4 areas that I address, nutrition being first and foremost. How the person is eating is very important. Another area is connective tissue health. And then the other 2 legs that I use, I think of a 4-legged stool, is people need to learn how to move in a way that the body was designed to move. And then another aspect that I address is something it's about the balance in the body. If you have one body part not working well, and then the opposite body part is working well, no matter what you do throughout the day, your body's going to compensate. It's going to alter how it's functioning in a way that will damage other structures. So it's important for people to balance themselves.
Why do you think there's so many pain issues in our society today? Was it always that way and we just didn't know about it? Or is there more pain?
I think there's a lot more pain. I think a lot of it is diet related. I see it all the time. That is the first thing I see people talk about and report when they change their diet, is that their pain is radically improved or eliminated.
What is a takeaway thought you can leave people with?
That they really need to take control. They need to be asking questions. They need to learn the risks and the benefits of things. I have so many people come into me who were advised to have injections and procedures and different things, and they wish that they knew then what they know now. They would never have agreed because they're dealing with the fallout for years. So it's very important to be educated, and you don't need to be a medical expert to ask questions. What are the benefits? What are the risks? And demand the answers.
Kopsaftis trains colleagues in her pain management strategy, and it's drawing interest from insurance providers as they look for ways to help patients and reduce costs. Ahead on Full Measure, Navy vets exposed to Agent Orange in Vietnam but denied benefits. An important update in their struggle next. An update to our reporting about Vietnam Navy vets fighting for justice after exposure to Agent Orange. They're close to winning their benefits. A reminder, in 2002, the VA excluded so-called blue water vets from automatic compensation because they served offshore.
Joe Lawley was deployed to Vietnam as a photographer's mate aboard the USS Constellation. After Vietnam, bad things started to happen. First, he got a weird skin disease he later learned was connected to herbicides like Agent Orange.
Like skin boils and lesions.
Lesions, everything.
Millions of gallons of Agent Orange were sprayed over Vietnam.
The ships make their water from the seawater. So if the water was contaminated, then we would have drawn it in.
Some of the ailments presumed to be caused by Agent Orange and compensated under a law passed in 1991, whether the vet was a soldier or sailor. Suddenly, in 2002, automatic compensation for the sailors, the blue water vets, was denied on a technicality. The VA determined blue water service doesn't count as Vietnam service. The blue water vets took their case to court, arguing that Vietnam service means land or sea. In January, a breakthrough. A federal court ruled for the vets.
I would like for a country that I've served to recognize what we gave and to provide care, health for those who have been afflicted.
So that court ruled the Blue Water Service counts just the same as those who were on the ground in Vietnam. In late March, VA Secretary Robert Wilkie said he plans to recommend that the Justice Department not challenge that decision, which could benefit some 90,000 vets. Coming up on Full Measure, Scott Thuman says you haven't lived until you've tasted Hanoi, Vietnam on a Saturday night. Next week on Full Measure, we go nuclear with an examination of the promise and taxpayer costs of a clean energy alternative.
Imagine giving somebody $15 billion, what they could do with that. Tesla started a car company that is revolutionizing the transportation sector with less money than that. So when you put it in that perspective, it really is a huge amount of money that's just really being wasted.
Should America get out of the nuclear business or go all in? Next week on Full Measure. As you know by now, we travel around the world to bring you stories on Full Measure. Sometimes the local culture and cuisine feel like they should be their own story. That's what happened to our Scott Thuman, who recently spent an eventful Saturday night in Vietnam and conducted his own taste test.
Hanoi, Vietnam's capital for much of the last 1,000 years. Today, it is transforming fast. 34-year-old writer Shi Mai is our guide. She's studied in London and spent time in New York, but says little compares to her capital.
It's a Saturday night. I feel like there's going to be lights and excitement no matter what.
Yes, out. People are just like out. Even though they don't have a plan to do something, they're just out cruising around, eating, but you are out.
Yeah, because everything's an adventure.
Yes, it's like there's so many people around, it's exciting.
Adding to the excitement this night, the city is gripped with soccer fever as the national team plays in a major international tournament. Everywhere we look, faces glued to screens. But our focus is one of the country's other big passions, a soup called pho. You can buy it everywhere from five-star hotels to street corners. And word is some of the best is often the cheapest.
So there you go.
Make it sound like everything I'm about to eat is good for me.
I'm not responsible for you after tonight, so I don't know.
So as long as I enjoy the night, that's all you care about. How I feel tomorrow is completely irrelevant.
The consequences, you...
Should I trust you?
No.
No?
Though pho is mostly just broth, herbs, and meat, the variations are endless, and it can have some kick.
Often we taste the broth first to know whether it's a good soup or not.
All right.
If it's spicy, we can change.
No, it's not. I had really spicy earlier. This is fine. When you sit around and you eat pho like this, there's kind of the great equalizer because everyone, regardless of their level of wealth, will eat it, from the upper class to the lower class, and sit around and talk to each other. Is that true?
Yes, yes. So it's the beauty of it. If you go to a fancy restaurant, you don't get the same flavors. If you want a good pho, you go on the street, and on the streets, everybody is equal, as long as you have money to pay for it. But it's quite cheap, so yeah.
Cheap indeed. Just a few dollars gets you the full experience.
I love that it's kind of, the experience is kind of a sensory overload. You've got all the different flavors and spice, which is great. You've got lights everywhere. You've got mopeds scooting by, people sitting around. Is that what makes it special?
Eating now is like have all of your senses sort of like stimulated, you know? You have a spectacle, you have the food. You have this kind of sense that you belong to a bigger world.
And that is when the country erupted as the national team won their big match. The celebrations went on for hours. Passion for sport and for food, and above all, letting all that's best in life play out on the streets in full view. That's Vietnam. For Full Measure, I'm Scott Thuman in Hanoi.
I could be wrong, but I'm not sure it's the pho that was so attractive to Scott at that dinner date. We'll have to ask him next time he's here. That's all for this week. Thanks for watching. I'm Sharyl Attkisson. Until next time, we'll search for more stories that hold powers accountable.